Hey, this is Nick Nielsen, Mad Scientist of Muscle, and what I've got for you today here is a review of a really unique piece of training equipment called the T2 Iso Trainer. Now, this one is a little bit different to describe in that it kind of combines a variety of training methods into one piece of equipment. Now, you might be familiar with suspension trainers, you might be familiar with band training. This is kind of a combination of that, plus what's called Iso-kinetic training. Now, they like to label this as called body fight. I like to call it friction training, where you're actually using not only friction, but the opposing muscle groups to get that friction. I'll kind of give you an idea of what this piece of equipment looks like first here before I kind of explain. It's a little bit tricky to explain just with words, so explaining with the demo is going to be helpful. Now, this right here is the main hub of the unit. Now, what you can see here is there's no wheels or moving parts in here. This is literally just a cam that has no moving parts, essentially. The nylon strap goes right in through here. Why is this good? Well, I'm going to show you. Because what this does is allows you to basically anchor this onto something and use these to work against each other. Now, what I'm going to show you here is how to attach this to a post, or in this case a rack post. Now, it comes with a couple of anchor straps. This one you can attach into a door jamb. So this goes on the other side of the door, you pull that through, close the door, and then you got a solid anchor point. Now for the post, you're basically just looping this through. Just like so. And now you've got something rock solid. So it's basically your simple, what's called a bail hitch, the same way you anchor a band onto a post or a band onto a bar in order to get that through. So now you've got yourself a solid anchor point. You can move this up, you can move this down wherever you need to. Now, in this case, I'm just putting the cam here directly on to the anchor point. However, they also include a bungee. Now this isn't like a bungee for band training. This is something that gives you a little bit extra, gives you a little bit of spring in it, but it's not necessarily for resistance. But it does increase the amount of exercises you can use with this piece of equipment. Now, right now once you've got this set up, this is what it's going to look like in terms of body fight. Now, when you're doing, for example, a row, you're not doing, I mean, you could use it just as a normal piece of suspension training equipment, so it does replace like a TRX or any other sort of suspension piece of equipment. It's very solid and will anchor very nicely to the door jamb or to just about anything solid. Now, the benefit of this one is you're going to be able to adjust the resistance on the fly. So as you're doing the exercise, so you're doing a row targeting your back, you can see I'm doing one arm at a time. If you want to increase the resistance, you start to fight harder with the non-working side. So you're doing a positive with one end, so positive here, and resisting with the other side. So you're doing a negative with the other hand. The more you resist with the other side, the harder it's going to be on the positive. It's pretty straightforward. So here's what it would look like with a row. And you can lean back, get more body weight resistance on top of that. So, and then you fight harder. And the harder you fight, the more friction resistance you get in that cam. So you can even lean way back, and like I said, this thing is good and solid. And basically, you're changing resistance on the fly based on how much direct resistance you give with the other side. All right, now let's say you want to work your chest with this and do some sort of push-up slash press. I recommend using a high anchor point for this, whether it's a chin-up bar or a high, basically door jamb anchor. Get the straps coming in from above, and then lean forward and down into it. And then you're just doing a simple, one arm at a time, press. And you can adjust resistance by moving backwards a little bit so your body's more horizontal. having the, what do you call it, straps here over your shoulders, I found is the best way to go. A low point with the straps coming up does tend to rub against the arms, so keeping them kind of out of the way above your shoulders is actually a better method. And then this is going to hit your triceps quite strongly as well. Now there are exercises you can also use with this where you're not anchoring to anything, where you're actually standing on the anchor strap and using that as the anchor point instead. For example, if I'm doing curls, here's the unit, here's that anchor strap. Instead of anchoring this strap to a bar, instead I'm going to step on it so my feet become the anchor strap. Now, as you can see, I've got the unit down here towards my feet. And then it's just going to be a matter of doing the same kind of movement, resisting with one side as you're pulling with the other side. So this is actually very effective for biceps. And you can use as much or as little resistance as you want. So it's obviously, speed. You resist more, it can be a lot harder. Changing on the fly. Now you can also do squats and lunges with this same setup. What you're going to do here is, whereas when you're doing upper body, it's a little bit more intuitive. With lower body, you're actually going to open up one of the loops here and put this around your waist. So your waist becomes the other, quote unquote, limb. A little bit hard to visualize. So you step through. That's around your waist. Now I'm going to lengthen this a little bit. And clearly there is a learning curve with this piece of equipment. That's one of the major things you'll find with this. It's once you kind of get an idea of how it works, it's actually not too bad. But it's going to take some time for you to figure out exactly what you're doing with this thing. So get here. You set your feet in the anchor strap if you're going to do squats. And then, because this is one limb, this is the other limb. So you're going to be resisting with your upper body. So you're going to be doing like a front raise if you're doing a squat. So coming down. And I'm actually going to pull this down in to get more resistance. Now, if you're going to do lunges with this, you will need to make a few more adjustments. What I found is this anchor strap right here needs to be brought in quite a lot. So it's very, I should say, quite a bit smaller than when you're doing squats. Like basically that you can just slip your foot into. Otherwise, you don't get as much resistance or range of motion. So, get that set your foot in there, and again, you're going to use upper body resistance as you're doing the movement with your lower body. Alright, so there are a few things I do need to mention with this. Is, as you can see, there's definitely a learning curve to learning how to use the T2 ISO trainer. There are really good benefits to it, but don't expect to jump right in the first time and just start banging out exercises. You will need to go through the setup, make sure it's solid, make sure you kind of get an idea of how it's working. I like to start with the row and the curl. Those are the two simplest ways to get started with this piece of equipment. Now, the other kind of drawback with this is with the leg training. It's much more useful, I found, for upper body training because of the versatility of your upper body. With the lower body, there's not as many planes of movement. In addition, if you're used to doing heavy weight training, the resistance you can apply to resist the lower body movement is a lot less than what you can apply with the upper body. So, I mean, obviously, if you're doing a squat, and if you're used to squatting a lot of weight, the amount of weight you can resist with your upper body doing a front raise is not really going to challenge you as much on a lower body movement like a squat. And the angle that you're pulling at also tends to be a bit different balance-wise than a free weight movement. That being said, it definitely does add resistance to the exercise. So if you are looking for some added resistance, especially for fat loss or metabolic conditioning type of training, this can be beneficial. However, for building a max squat, this is not the way to go. This is not the piece of equipment that you're going to be looking for to improve your max squat strength. It does allow you to keep good tension on the muscles, so it does have some benefits in terms of building muscle. Primarily, I would use this one for kind of body weight movement and calisthenics strength, and not top end strength, especially on leg movements like squats and lunges. All right, now as I mentioned, there is a bungee attachment that goes with this. And I also mentioned that it's not necessarily for adding direct band resistance to any of the movements you're doing. What it does is allows you to either move closer to reduce tension or move further to increase tension. So you're not, like I said, directly increasing resistance by doing band movements. What you're doing is stretching the bungee either more or less, so that, for example, if you're doing a row, you step back further, you get more tension. Moving closer, you get less tension. Now, what it also does is, of course, lengthen the entire length of the apparatus, which is something to consider if you're working out in a small space. But this kind of thing does give you more tension options. Right, now, one of the other ways I actually really like to use the T2 Iso Trainer with is not with bodyweight stuff, but to combine it with free weight / cable exercises. So for example, one of the best ones I found is a standing seated cable row. Essentially what you do is you attach this right on to the low pulley. Now, step back, and then now, as you can see when I'm doing this, by suspending that weight stack up while I'm doing that back and forth movement, alternating with the upper body, you're getting that isometric tension as you're pulling, as you're also doing the movement. So you're getting even greater effect from this than you would just with doing this on its own with body weight resistance and friction resistance, adding in the weight stack. Now you can also do this with a pull down as well, and here's what that looks like. So there's a couple of ways you can do this with the pull down. You can do it similar to with the cable row, where you're doing this, holding it suspended as you're doing the sawing kind of movement back and forth. And if I had a higher pulley, I'd be able to do a more vertical movement pattern. But if I'm underneath, it's basically going to stop right there, so it's not as beneficial. But the other method you can do is step back, pull back, get a little resistance, pull with one hand, and then pull with the other hand while leaving the other hand exactly where it is. And that's a fantastic way to go with this as well. But really, with the T2 Iso Trainer, you're only really limited to your imagination and to what you can do in the combinations of movements where you can actually get resistance on one side while doing the exercise on the other side. So this can be direct opposition using the same muscle group, whether it's the curls, so you're resisting on one bicep while moving with the other bicep, or something like this, where you're doing a bicep and a shoulder press combination. So start at the top of the shoulder press, curling up, and then resisting the shoulder press with the bicep on the way down. So as you can see, there's lots of different combinations you can use with this. Now, in addition to the body fight and friction resistance benefits you get from the T2, you can use this as a simple suspension device as well. So you don't necessarily even need to use the friction part of it to get a lot of benefits from it. You can anchor it on something solid, whether it's a door frame or a rack post like this or a chin-up bar, and you can do just a regular suspension type of exercise. Doing a bodyweight suspended row, like so, without even doing any friction-based movement. And you can combine the two where you row, you come down, do your friction movements, and then do your suspension movements. So you can combine them into one set of one exercise. Now, this also translates in the ability to do a suspension push-up as well. So basically you want to lengthen the straps a fair bit, get those straps over your shoulder, and then you're just doing a suspension push-up just as you would with a TRX. Which is very effective. So one of the things I have found with the T2, it's much more effective with pulling movements, such as the curls and such as the rows and the pull downs. Basically, the pushing stuff, it's the problem of any suspension type of exercise where the straps have to go somewhere because you're coming with the anchor point behind you. So they either have to go over the shoulder or underneath, and they do contact the arms. So that's a consideration for this, but it's also a consideration for any kind of suspension trainer as well. Now, one of the other things you'll notice with the T2 here is the handles. Blue handles that are basically plastic tubes. Now, not so bad when you're doing lighter weight stuff, but what you'll find as you start to increase the effort level and the resistance, these things do deform a fair bit. So when you're holding it, they do bend, as you can see on there. They'll bend quite a bit. This can affect your grip strength, and it's not the most comfortable, but to my mind, this is not a deal breaker because essentially you're not using this for max stuff anyways. You're not using this for building like your 1 rep max squat or your 1 rep max bench press. This is more of a conditioning and body weight kind of thing. So having these kind of handles, is it ideal? I don't think it's ideal. I'd rather have something a little more solid that fits the hand better and gives you a little more grip strength stability, but it's still very effective in terms of your grip for the purposes that it's being used for. Now, in terms of strength, you want to be sure this thing is going to be strong enough to support your body weight as you're doing suspension exercises. Now, when you're doing suspension stuff, you're actually anchored in one spot, so you're not even taking up your full body weight. However, what I'm going to do here is show you with my entire body weight on here, or almost entire, like 99% of it, this holds up just fine. So what I've got here is this set up in the chin-up bar. I'm going to slip my feet in through here. Now, this isn't any exercise that I'm going to demonstrate or anything like that, but as you can see, I'm not even holding myself up. I'm just using my thumb for balance on here, nothing else. It's got my full body weight supported on this thing, and I'm about 200 pounds right now. All right, now to wrap it up, the T2 Iso Trainer is a really fantastic piece of equipment when you use it for the purpose it was intended for, which is bodyweight training using the body fight iso-kinetic resistance and using it for suspension training. Now, it's not going to build your top end deadlift or squat strength, so that's not the purpose of this. If you're training at home with limited equipment or traveling, it's absolutely perfect for that. It's well constructed, it's not going to break. There is a bit of a learning curve to it, so plan on spending a little bit of time just getting used to the movements and getting used to the setups. But once you get the idea of how it works, it's actually very intuitive in terms of how it functions. So again, overall, I really like the T2. It does have a few little issues, but nothing I think that should hold you back from getting this if the purpose you're getting it for is being able to train at home using a variety of body weight and suspension movements.